Hi, Denise.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
Sure.
Um, are you doing okay? Is your recovery going well from surgery?
Yeah, you can't really tell too
I was
much.
gonna say
I'm like
I
so happy.
that's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, you can't. Yeah, it all looks pretty good.
thank you.
Yeah,
I'm shocked. I last week I wouldn't have guessed this.
that's really good news. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you joining us from?
I live in Pasadena, California.
Pasadena. Okay.
Do you know where that is?
Is that LA area?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean it's where Caltech is. So one famous university to another famous university.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think um we're probably gonna wait another 2-3 minutes until
Okay.
people are,
Let me go shut a door that is banging in the wind.
yeah,
And
that's
I'll
pretty
be
good idea.
right back. Okay.
Yeah. So I think we'll just wait like 2 more minutes until it's 5 past for people that are joining late. But thanks to everyone who's already joined. I can see there's 15 people. Okay, great. Yeah, I think we'll wait like 1 more minute until it
Okay.
gets to about 5 past, and then
Okay.
hopefully all the latecomers will have joined in by then.
Great. How's the weather there?
It's not been too bad the last few days, but it did definitely rain a lot in the last few weeks. It was very English.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Um, like very windy and not too cold, but windy and rainy.
Well, it's windy here, and normally it's just hot, so it's kind of a nice
Pleasant.
change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll give it another sort of 20 seconds. Don't know if any more people are joining. Okay, great. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining, and thanks so much, Denise, for coming and taking the time to talk to us. Just as a brief outline, we'll do about 30 to maybe 35 minutes of chaired questions, and then we'll open up the questions to the audience. And feel free to post your questions in the chat. And there's also a Q&A section in Zoom where you can post your questions. So I'll quickly give an introduction to Denise. So Denise Ruffner is the Chief Business Officer for Cambridge Quantum Computing, which is one of the largest quantum computing firms in the world, with pioneering research in quantum software, quantum chemistry, and also quantum security. And prior to working for Cambridge Quantum Computing, Denise worked for IBM and was responsible for several hundred millions of quotas in annual revenue, as well as leading the IBM Quantum Startup Program. Denise holds a master's degree in neurobiology and molecular biology, and she's also flying the flag for female representation in physics, and particularly quantum computing, and is the president of the Women in Quantum chapter for the One Quantum Network. And she'll give us critical insight into her work at a quantum technology firm and into the field as a whole. So yeah, welcome Denise. Thanks for joining in. So yeah, I'll just go straight into it and start with the first question, which is, when and how did you first come into contact with quantum computing?
So, hi everyone. I came into quantum computing, so I worked at IBM for 18 years, and IBM is the leading patenting body in the world. And I was always really fascinated with the patents and the research work that IBM was doing. And so I heard very early on in my career at IBM about quantum computing, and I was always just very nosy about it and curious and looked into it. So I've watched it for quite a while. And then it's a long, funny story how I joined the team, but I ultimately joined the quantum team. And that really kind of cemented my education and interest, and really gave me my focus for how I wanted to change my career and stay in quantum computing. So as you mentioned, I'm a biologist by training. And so my prior job at IBM was I was in charge of genomics, selling to genomics customers in the world. So I had always kind of stick to the biological sciences. So when I went to quantum, it was a departure, but I always viewed it as there were a lot of really great quantum people, but there weren't a lot of biologists. And so I felt that having a biological background was actually an asset if I could combine the two, because we talk about applications in quantum computing, and that some of them are biological or drug screening or any number of things. So I felt that intersection between kind of my training and then my later training in quantum was a really good and fruitful intersection.
Great. Then the next question would be how working for a quantum technology startup like Cambridge Quantum Computing compares to working in a market-leading tech firm like IBM. Are there perhaps actually quite a few similarities, or is the work a little different?
So I have a confession to make, and that is over the weekend I changed companies. So I have worked for Cambridge Quantum Computing for a little bit over the past year, and I'm happy to talk about it. It's a wonderful company. So working at IBM is a very big company, tons of people, lots of politics, lots of procedure, lots of rules. It's neither bad nor good. It's just the way the company is run. And every company has its own personality and its own areas of emphasis. So IBM has a lot of rigor on everything from how you do an expense report to patenting something to any number of things. And it takes, I always joke, it took me 5 years to get used to working at IBM because there's so much procedure, or there's certain ways to do it, and you learn it, and it's not bad. It's just something you learn. What I liked about a startup, and in particular Cambridge Quantum Computing was great, is that at a startup you get to decide what it is about procedure or what it is about how you do things how do you want to do it. And because you're a small group of people, it's easy to implement, it's easy to do, it's easier for people to follow along. And so these rules that you have when you have 100,000 employees, and you absolutely have to have the big rules then, you don't need at a startup. And so you can be much more nimble and agile, and it's very exciting. Now, neither side of the coin is perfect. And I think neither side of the coin, it just depends on the individual. But both of them are very great solutions. Now, what I'll say is maybe at IBM there's a little more money, And there's a lot of activities going on where at a smaller company, you do have to sometimes think of whether the value is there and whether you want to put your money there, where sometimes at IBM, there's a little more money so you can experiment. But again, that's not a rule either, because it really just depends on the company. So I think a lot of this depends on what environment you as an individual like and where you flourish, and whether it's a big structure or whether it's something that's a little bit more nimble with less structure. And neither are wrong. I'll tell you, I loved being at IBM, but I equally loved joining a startup, and I loved more of the freedom at the startup. So for me, I think I would say that even though I spent all this time at IBM, I'm a startup person, just because I like the nimbleness of it.
Great. Yeah, I think that's really useful maybe for some of our listeners who are thinking about what they want to do in the future and whether they want to work for a startup or for a bigger company.
So let me add one thing. Is there's a joke sometimes in the industry that you go to a school and like, it's almost like a lot of people work for a big company for a couple years and then they leave. And so you go to IBM school, and it just means that you experienced a big company and you've experienced some of the policies and procedures. And it's a great basic education into the corporate world or into the business world. But you don't have to stay there for 18 years like I did. So a lot of people go for a couple years, learn some things, and then use that as a basis to branch out. And I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, that's fine. No, that's really, really useful advice, I think. And then the next question, which maybe I should have asked before, is how's working with businesses in quantum computing different or actually similar to work with other biotech companies that you've done? And maybe is there actually an intersection where some companies are focusing on quantum biology?
So working with businesses in quantum computing, I think what I like about this industry so much right now is that the industry is very small and it's very cordial. And a lot of times when you're in a competitive situation, there's a lot of backstabbing and there's a lot of negativity. And right now in quantum computing, we all know each other. We're all friends. We all go on panels together. We all, end up at the same bar and have a cocktail together. And even though we're competing, there's a real everybody's very cordial, and there's not a lot of hatred or backstabbing or negativity. And I love that. I think that's one of the things I love the most, is that it's a small circle of people and we all try really hard to get along and be fair, and there's enough business out there for everyone. So I think that's one of the loveliest things about quantum computing right now. When I was in biotech, it was a little more competitive. And I think quantum computing will get there, but it's not there right now. So I just think quantum computing right now is a great place because everybody is so kind to each other and we're all trying to help, and we're not just saying, go away, or, oh, he's not good, or it's really just, we're all in this together and we're all trying to make this technology happen, and we're all trying to be very fair to the technology and how we represent it. And I think overall, there's just a real camaraderie.
That's really good to hear. But I guess maybe, as you said, that might change as the market gets more saturated with more companies and more technology that's been developed. Yeah. So the next question is, what are the highest potential impacts of quantum computing in the short and midterm, in your opinion?
This is hilarious. This is a great question. And this is like the question of the ages, is where will quantum computing have its first impact? And I've been really focused that I think it's in chemistry. And Cambridge Quantum Computing is doing a lot of great work in chemistry, and I think has some very good creative approaches to doing chemistry. And then I changed companies over the weekend, and they gave me their pitch deck, and they said, absolutely not. The first industry is machine learning. And I was like, wait a minute, what are you talking about? So what's interesting is everybody has their own point of view. And I think it does depend on the creativity and the expertise of the scientist on being able to bring out whatever performance they can get from quantum computers that are still relatively small, and how they can use that in an advantageous way. So my bet is chemistry. I think optimization is also very interesting. But there's differing opinions among applications. And I think, we've had quite a few announcements about quantum computing performance in the past couple weeks. So let's review. IBM had a summit where they announced a new giant dilution refrigerator and said they were working towards thousands of qubits. We had a Nature paper on a new detector from IQM out of Finland. We had Honeywell announce the highest quantum volume to date of 128. And does everybody know what quantum volume is? Nod. I can't see you, so I'm joking. Nod if you do. We can get into that. But then what also happened right as Honeywell announced a 128 quantum volume, a small startup company out of Maryland called IonQ announced 4 million plus quantum volume. And so what that shows me is that the hardware race is really heating up. And then the name of the game turns into who can access that hardware, and are they clever enough to take advantage of that hardware to show what we call quantum advantage, or the ability of the quantum computer to outperform a classical computer. And I think there's going to be many more examples of quantum advantage this year and next year, just given the fact that the performance is increasing so quickly, and much more quickly than we ever thought. So, and I'm digressing, and I apologize, I can talk for hours, but ever since I started working on this at IBM, everybody said quantum computing is 5 to 10 years away. And so, you talk to people like, oh, it's 5 to 10 years away. Oh yeah, 5 to 10 years away. It's not. And that's what's happened in the past 2 weeks, is we're really seeing this glimmer of light that this technology is coming. It's coming much quicker than we thought. And it's not 5 to 10 years away. I think it's 1 to 2 years away, could be 2 to 3, but it's much closer than we think. And there's a lot of companies out there doing a lot of really great innovative work. And I think the time is now.
That's great to hear and very encouraging. It's also interesting that you're putting your money on quantum chemistry, because I would say from all the people I've spoken to, that's probably not the view I've heard.
So what view have you heard?
I would say probably like cryptography and factorization and security is what I've heard most people talk about. So the next question, which was kind of like a reality check of what you just said, is do you think that there exists a disparity between the actual implications and achievements of quantum computing and the hype that is often portrayed in the media?
Mm-hmm. So hype, let's talk about hype. That's a big deal. So when I first started at quantum computing at IBM, I joked that I was the quantum computing police. And that was because I would find these conferences that Joe Smith from IBM was presenting IBM Quantum, and it would be some guy that decided that he was an expert at quantum, and he was presenting a talk, and quantum computing would cure cancer in 5 years. And so my job was actually to find all these misportrayals of the technology and squash them, essentially. So for a while there, everybody hated me, and it was because IBM felt so strongly that it would hurt the technology in the long run if it was misrepresented so early in its development. And so to that end, I ultimately developed a program called the Ambassador Program, where we trained people at IBM how to talk about quantum, and they could only use a fixed set of slides. And they really went through a very rigorous training, because what we wanted to do is make sure that the messaging to the world was accurate. And I think that's something everybody on this call should be concerned about, is what is accurate messaging. And saying something like, oh, it's going to cure cancer. I mean, I think there are huge implications that quantum computing will change society in the future. But that's not next year. That's many years away. And I think we all are very excited about the technology, but also need to be very careful how we present it, because it doesn't serve all of us if we oversell it. And so I think it's always really important to be very accurate on where we are and where we're going. And I know that my timing of 1 to 2 to 3 years is aggressive, and I'll admit that. But I didn't say that it would cure cancer in 3 years. So I would just say hype is really our enemy, all of our enemy. And I think that this is a really promising, great technology, just as it is. We don't need to hype it. We can just talk about it as it is, because it has so much potential that I don't think that representing it very thoughtfully as it is today hurts it in any way or makes it less interesting.
Yeah, great. Well, I guess it's always important to be realistic about what you're talking about. So the next question is, what skills do you think are particularly important to succeed in quantum computing, and which skills are perhaps less important than elsewhere?
So tell me who's listening to this podcast. Are you physics students, or?
I mean, people can send their response to chat. My guess would be it's probably majority physics undergrads or graduates, maybe some computer scientists, maybe some mathematicians, chemists.
Okay. So all of those, a computer science undergrad, right on. All of those skills are important. So there's not one skill that makes you like the super quantum computing person. We need programmers, we need theoretical physicists, we need business people like me, we need any skill that you can imagine is needed in this industry. And I think what is really great is when people call on a company or go to a company and they know what quantum is. It's amazing how many people I've interviewed and there's like, no, I don't know what it is. And it's like, really, you couldn't have watched a YouTube video last night? Really? Come on. So I think having like a physics graduate student or a physics undergraduate student who wants to contribute either scientifically or through the business, there's a ton of demand. You have chosen a major in computer science as well. You have chosen a major that is going to be very much in demand throughout your life. Right now, every company is hungry for scientists and programmers and even just people that are aware of quantum. So if you're a physics undergraduate and you want to get into business, they will love you. So I would just say having done coursework in physics, in computing, in math, really makes you attractive to any of the companies in this industry.
Great. Yeah, I think this is definitely a strong word of encouragement for our listeners to get involved in quantum computing if they're interested. So the next question would be, could you tell us a little bit more about how you perceive the underrepresentation of women in physics and maybe particularly quantum computing, and about your work with a one quantum network?
Sure. So a couple things. So as a scientist and as a woman, I've always been in the minority, which never bothered me. I have a very interesting background in that my mother is a physicist, and she got her PhD in 1947. She was the only woman, and largely had a career where she was the only woman, period. Where at least in my scientific career, I was one of a few. What happened in quantum computing is over the past couple years, you would pull up websites of companies and it would be like men. Oh, let me look at this company, men. And it really became pretty clear that there just weren't a lot of women in quantum computing. And what happened this year when COVID hit is my phone started ringing off the hook, which was, like, I don't know why, but all of a sudden, probably, I would say 10 to 15 people a week were reaching out to me, mostly from LinkedIn. And if you guys aren't on LinkedIn, you need to be. But they would reach out to me on LinkedIn and say, I'm a physics undergrad. I want to get into quantum. What do I do? I have this job issue. What do I do? And all of a sudden, I became the poster child for women in quantum. And I was like, okay, this is great. And I'm happy to help people. But I realized that it might be more interesting to have a community and form a community of people so that we would, as women in quantum, get to know each other. We could highlight each other's achievements. We could help each other. And so I started this group with a gentleman, Andre Koenig. We call it One Quantum. And there's several chapters. We have a chapter on startups. We have a chapter on Africa. And we have a chapter on women. And if you want, I can send you after the talk the link to some of the women talks. So we have had 2 summits. And I can say this, I've never gone to talks where someone was so open about their career and said, here's my career path. And you look at it and you're like, oh God, I'm horrible. Look at how great this person is. And then they come back and they say, well, I got laid off here and I wanted to go to grad school there and they wouldn't take me. So I went there. And it's been a really great education to learn that thanks for that link. That everybody goes through a career path, and there's turns and there's bends and there's some really great things and there's some not so really great things. And so I love these women in quantum summits because people get the opportunity to really share what their career path has been like, what their challenges have been, whether it's a woman having children, whether it's they got laid off, whether it's someone fell out of love of physics and was trying to get out of physics and then found a great physics job. And so this group has just been a really great way to get the discussion going about challenges in business and careers. And of course, it's open to everyone. We do only have women speakers, at least at this point, because what I'm trying to do is get a platform for women to talk. Oh, Rishi, you're on. Hey, Rishi. So get a platform for women to talk, but also start getting people educated on what a career is like. And it's not this perfect thing. It's about as opportunities are presented to you, you take advantage of them. And sometimes that's great. And sometimes it's less than great. And you keep on moving. And ultimately you assemble this body of knowledge that makes you very valuable to a company. So, I'll tell you, if you're a woman and you're on this podcast, every company is looking to hire women. They're looking for men too, but women are harder to come by, and companies are feeling the pressure that they need to not be all men. And I would just say there's just tremendous opportunity overall in the industry. So if you're a man, don't worry about it. There's lots of opportunity everywhere.
Yeah, great. That sounds really cool. So I posted a link in the chat, so to everyone who's listening, you can check out the link.
Yeah.
And as Rishi said, the summits are amazing. Yeah.
So
So
I'll mention one other thing.
yeah.
I also do a podcast, and I'm not advertising me, but we do a podcast. It's called quantumworlddetangled.com. And it's a weekly podcast with kind of two business people and a scientist where we bring in different startups or different kind of famous people. And we talk to them about what they're doing. And we ask them some questions about kind of who they are and who their idols are and all sorts of stuff. And it's a great way for those of you that want to learn um, more about some of the personalities in the industry and what some of the people are like. It's just really interesting. We had a scientist from South America. We had a CEO for a company in Japan. And it just gives you a flavor of some of the different people and personalities and in the quantum world and the way that they think. And I think it's just a good overall way to start learning about different people and learning about how people are approaching problems and what they think is important. And so I encourage you, I know we're all stuck at home watching videos, but these are meant to be on the short side. And it's just a good way to start learning about the different personalities and the different people and the different companies in the industry.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. I didn't know that, and I just looked at the website and it looks very interesting. So yeah, we have one more question, which I guess was motivated a little bit by me reading about Iron Bridge on the Cambridge Quantum
Okay.
Computing website. But so the question is, what potential impact might quantum computing have on the future of the IT security market, and what is Cambridge Quantum doing in that regard?
So couple weeks ago in mid-September, Cambridge Quantum announced, along with IBM, the availability of being able to generate certified quantum random numbers on the IBM Q experience or on the IBM quantum computer. And so this is an algorithm that Cambridge Quantum has written that certifies. So you know it's not just generating a random number, it's also checking that it truly is a random number. And Cambridge Quantum believes that this is the beginning of kind of the revolution where customers or people or users can now use quantum random numbers to secure let's say their data center or whatever it is they choose to secure. So I think it's a very pivotal finding. There was a paper in Archive on it. I think the main author is a guy named Florian Curchod, Curchod. Some excellent scientific work. The Iron Bridge device is complementary to that, although right now the emphasis is on doing this generated from the quantum computer. And you'll also notice that last week, Toshiba announced a quantum encryption initiative. So there's a lot going on in quantum encryption. And I'm interested by, there's a lot of companies out there that are also in quantum encryption. So it will be interesting. Again, there's a horse race going on who has what. From what I see in my work, Cambridge Quantum is the most advanced, which is great because they're a local UK firm for all of you. But what also needs to happen is that customers need to start asking for quantum random numbers to use it. As you guys know, the current encryption standards do not include quantum standards. And so there are some changes that need to take place at the standards level so that it regulates or it requests or it mandates that companies start using quantum derived numbers, which are inherently much safer than the current numbers that we use today.
Yeah, great, thanks. So this would be the end of the chat questions, but I actually have one more question. I don't know if you can answer it, but given that you said you're not working for Cambridge Quantum Computing anymore, who are you working for now?
Who am I working for now?
Or is that not to be revealed yet?
I can't reveal it.
Okay, that's fine.
I can't reveal it, but I will tell all of you, link with me on LinkedIn. It will be on LinkedIn later this week. The company is doing a press release and has asked me not to speak about it until Thursday. And, you know, I spoke earlier, life gives you opportunities. You know, Cambridge Quantum is an incredible company with incredible science, and something came up that just seemed so very fascinating to me that I had to try it. And I'm very excited about it. And this is kind of part of life where you have these twists and turns, because I wanted to be at Cambridge Quantum for 5 or 10 years and never thought that so quickly I would find something else that called my name so strongly. So one of the things that I would say to everyone out there is go after your dream, and sometimes your dream changes, and go with it and learn new things. Now I see Thomas has a question.
Yeah, I was going to say this. So maybe the first question is it's posted in the chat by Thomas Toppel. Is there a role for philosophical reflections on quantum computation / information in the business world? Thanks, Thomas.
Thomas, that's a great question, because a journalist asked me the other day, is there a philosopher that philosophizes about quantum computing and its impact on society? And, you know, who could you refer me to? And I was stumped, and I went to the internet and I found someone, and the last talk that this person had given was like in 2005. And so I came up with nothing. And so I think there is a role for philosophical reflections on quantum computing. And I think that if you feel strongly about it, you have a tremendous platform today to start sharing those reflections with the world, because it is something that people are asking and are very interested in. It's just not my expertise. But if it's yours, I think it's a tremendous opportunity for you. And I would really encourage you to develop that.
Yeah, great. To anyone else, so Maria has also posted a question in the Q&A. I'll quickly read it out in case someone might not have seen it. So Maria's asking, hi, you mentioned hearing about the challenges in people's careers at the Women in Quantum Summit. What are the main challenges you found during your career?
So couple challenges. One is that in case you guys can't tell, I'm a very strong woman or strong person, and I have a strong opinion. And some people don't like that. And so, you know, we all need to find the group of people that we work best with, given our personalities. And I think that's not necessarily because I'm a woman. I think that's just my personality. So I think we all have to find the right group of people to work within. I think the other thing is that there were times in my career where I was given job opportunities that I didn't want, and people talked me into it, and I took them, and I didn't want them, and I did them. And now, like 5 years later, I'm glad I did them because I learned something new. But I would say sometimes you do things in your career to stay employed, or because your mentor tells you you should do it, and it's hard to do. And that to me was very challenging. But funny enough, today, I'm really glad I did it, although at the time it was really difficult. So that's what I would say is I do have mentors in my life, and I do try to listen to them. And sometimes you don't always want to hear what they say, or sometimes you may not want to do what they say. And in the case that I've followed them, it's always worked out for me in the long run, but it's been very difficult. It's often very difficult to do something that might seem to be less interesting, or do something because it's a gap in your education. And I always just try to take the, I always try to remove the emotion from it and try to figure out what is right for me in the long term and do that. And then I would say the third thing that's difficult, and I think this is a life lesson, is what I call taking the high road. And that is, I believe in the best of people, and I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. So even if, I don't know what, somebody does something that I don't like, I really try hard to not personalize it and to try to show understanding towards the other person and find ways to make bridges and move on. So I would tell you to always take the high road and always believe the best in people and keep moving. So those are my challenges. Now I see a question: is Cambridge Quantum doing any kind of work on error correction, fault tolerant quantum computing? So Cambridge Quantum Computing does do some error correction. There is a really great product called Ticket that is a software package that allows you to write your algorithm, and you write it on top of Ticket, and then you can slide Ticket, and you can run that algorithm on different devices. So even if you've written it on QuizKit, you can run it on a Rigetti device. And so Ticket is a really great software package that allows you to move around what you've written without having to rewrite, but it also goes down into the stack, and it allows you to do some error correction. It allows you to optimize algorithms. It allows you to choose the best qubits on a device. So it's a really great piece of software. So that's something on GitHub. You guys are all at an academic institution. You can download it for free, and I suggest you check it out. And if you're interested in doing that kind of work, certainly reach out to Cambridge Quantum, because that's a very big area of research for them. And I think it's the best product in the world. Plug for Cambridge Quantum, sorry.
Yeah. I don't see any other questions, but oh no, there is another question.
Could you please hint, is my, oh yes, of course it's still in quantum computing, of course. It's with a startup, it's with a hardware startup. I wrote on LinkedIn that I was going to the best hardware startup in the world. And so all my friends from IBM sent me notes this weekend. Oh, you're joining IBM again. No, I'm not. So that's the hint, but just tremendously excited. I love new technology. I think probably like the rest of you, love new technology, love seeing advances, love seeing people trying to push the envelope. And that's what appealed to me about this company, is I felt that they were thinking about things differently and in a new way. And I just felt I wanted to be part of it. And it's changing jobs is a tremendously bittersweet thing, because you have a job and you love it and it's great and it's fulfilling and you work with wonderful people, and then all of a sudden something comes along and you're like, wait a minute, oh, I kind of like this. And so it's a very hard decision to make. But for me right now, I do want to stay in quantum computing. That is a must. And there's just plenty of roles and plenty of variety. And so that's the other thing I would say to all of you is, go out there, try it, get an internship. There's a bunch of internships that I saw on LinkedIn this morning. There's part-time jobs, there's full-time jobs, there's startups, there's major corporations. Go out there and try something. If you don't like it, you can change. but this is a great field. I think it will carry you for your career, and it will be a really interesting, fulfilling career because all of you can say, I was there when quantum volume was, 64. And not a lot of people will be able to tell that story. And so we're actually in a really historical time. And you getting involved in quantum computing is really just this great career decision. And I think a great, it's going to change a lot. And I think it's just going to be tremendously fascinating for the next 50 years.
Yeah, so I actually had another question to follow up from Thomas's question. So I definitely think there is a role for philosophical reflection on quantum computing and information. But I was thinking that maybe if we, for example, look to an industry like AI and big data, where I think it took a bit of time until people actually started to think about sort of the ethical and philosophical ramifications of what they were doing. And I think it just took like a bit, they needed another milestone in sort of technological advancement until people really started to think about what the implications were of what they were doing. And do you think maybe this will be the case as well in quantum computation and information, where we need to reach a higher level of technological implementation and development until maybe people really start thinking about the philosophical and ethical ramifications of what we're doing?
So yes and no. I think I would love to have someone say, what would this world be like if everything was optimized? Or, so I think there's a lot of room for some really interesting thought beyond ethics of just like, what is the value of some of these solutions and how will that change the world? How will traffic change? What would the world be like in 5 to 10 years if traffic went away or if there was some way to optimize it? So when I looked at that question on philosophical reflections, that's more what I was thinking. I think there's ethical ramifications as well, and I think that's a huge area that always needs to be talked about. But even just if you think about what are some of the solutions and what are some of these age-old problems that quantum computing can solve, and what would it be like if they were solved, and what other problems might it create, or how would it change the world? So that's kind of how I was thinking about that. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
And then I saw a question.
That makes sense. Yeah.
I saw a question from Maria saying, having worked with IBM and CQC and seen their collaboration, how do I think the collaboration between larger companies and smaller companies will evolve in the future? And that's a really interesting question. Right now, there's a lot of companies, and I do see that some are going to buy others, or there's going to be some consolidation. Since 2018, in 2018 January, there were 10 quantum startups in the world, and now there's probably 375 to 400 quantum startups. So what we're going to see, I think, is more collaboration, and it may be between the giants, like a Microsoft or an IBM or a Google and a startup. It could be between a couple startups. I think that's yet to be determined, and I think the companies are still trying to figure out what that optimal arrangement is. Cambridge Quantum is interesting because they're the only company in the world that both IBM and Honeywell have invested in, which is very interesting. And whether more of the I'm going to say big companies are going to invest in startups, that's to be determined. I know a lot of startups would love that. So I think this is a model that's evolving, and Cambridge Quantum has been a very good beneficiary of it. And I look forward to seeing what happens in the future with Cambridge Quantum and with other companies as they evolve. Now, in what way is the work
Yep.
done in the quantum computing industry different than the work done in academia? I don't think it's any different. I think that there are parts of the industry that are doing pure research, and there are parts of the industry that are developing products. And so obviously the product development part is a little different than academia. So if you were putting together an enterprise software package to do quantum chemistry, that might be a little bit different than what you were doing in academia. But if you were looking at quantum chemistry to solve a problem like, I'm going to say drug screening, that might be something you would do both in academia and industry. And I think the nice thing is that when you go interview at any company or any industry, any academic job, it's very clear what end result they're looking for, whether it's a publication or whether it's development of a new technology or whether there's a roadmap and you have to do something within certain periods of time. And so that way you can pick which process suits your personality and suits what you want to do the best.
I see there's another question from Peter Murnay about quantum machine learning. What do you think about quantum machine learning? My impression is that there's a factor of it might work. Why not try to combine buzzwords involved? Is that overly skeptical?
So I talked to someone about quantum machine learning this morning. There's a lot of work being done on quantum machine learning. I think it holds a lot of promise. There is some question of what the right quantum computing technology is for quantum machine learning because it involves so many shots, and whether you want to do it on a faster quantum computer like a superconducting or whether you do it on a slower quantum computer, there's a lot of work being done. I would suggest you look at a company called Entropica in Singapore, who's doing a lot of machine learning. Cambridge Quantum, again, is doing machine learning, as is a company in the UK, Raco, also in London. So there's a lot of machine learning going on in quantum. I'm not sure what you mean by why not try to combine buzzwords. So maybe you could help me there, Peter? Or do you think that it's just both quantum computing and machine learning sound cool? So yeah, we can do machine learning on quantum. Yeah, sure, right? I will say that I view quantum computing as a tool. So when you look at computing and particularly machine learning, you have FPGAs, you have GPUs, you have quantum computing. And so what the final answer is to solve a particular problem, we don't know yet, but I don't think that it's necessarily going to be only quantum computing, at least certainly not at this point. And so I think you have, so there is a lot of work being done on machine learning, and I think there is potential for it in quantum, but there is also potential for it using GPUs and FPGAs. Quantum winner, oh, one of my favorite questions. So quantum winner is this idea that it's hard to find funding for quantum computing companies because the technology is still so far away that venture capitalists don't want to fund it because they can't get the return on their investment. So a venture capitalist typically wants a 3 to 5 to 7 year return on investment. And so people feel that it's hard to get funding for quantum computing companies because the gap between the technology and kind of the solution is still so far away that it's hard to get funding. I haven't seen a quantum winner. And I have also seen that there are lots of creative ways to get funding for a company. It's not just about venture capital money. It's also about, there's something called family offices where many wealthy individuals have a family office where they invest their wealth. So family offices are a great way to get money. And then there's also a lot of corporations that have venture funds. So a lot of times when I go to a corporation to try to sell to them, they're so interested in the solution and in the technology that their venture arm gets involved and they end up making an investment in the company. So there's more than one way to fund a company. And I think there are a lot of active funders out there. And it's a question of putting together a business plan with a roadmap and having kind of the right story told in the way, right business story. And I think that money is there. So I don't think there's a quantum winner. But I do think, like anything, you have to be creative when you go after getting funding.
Great. I don't know if there are any other questions. Can't see any in the.
So are all you guys on LinkedIn? I know it's not an academic thing, but LinkedIn is a great way to network and meet people. And so if you're not on there, I would suggest you join, send me an invite. I'd love to link with you. There's a lot of news that comes across. It's just a great way to stay informed about what's going on in the quantum world. So think about, it's free. Just think about signing up and becoming part of it.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for the recommendation. And yeah, thanks for everyone who joined in, and thanks so much, Denise, for taking the time to talk to us and to answer our questions. I don't think there's any other questions. Post them now. Yeah, but otherwise, I think this is the conclusion of our Q&A. So yeah, thanks for joining in again, and hope everyone has learned something or taken some things for the future and have been inspired in a way. Thanks.
Great, and reach out to me if I can help you in any way. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.